Welcome to the Ben Nye Company. My name is Dana Nye and I'm president of Ben Nye Makeup. It's my pleasure to present an intimate look at my father's illustrious career, which spans Hollywood's golden years. We're now on location at one of Hollywood's leading film studios, 20th Century Fox, and I'm standing in front of their grand new entrance. Today, in addition to feature films, Fox produces popular TV shows, software, sports and news broadcasts, and much more. However, you'll be delighted to know that much of the studio still looks the same as when my father began his apprenticeship in 1935. Hollywood's leading actors and directors produce legendary entertainment on the sound stages here at Fox. My father's legacy is still very visible today as new generations continue to enjoy his creativity. At age 36, my father was chosen Fox makeup director after 5 short years as a freelance artist. Even in his early years, he had a keen eye for realism. For the next 23 years, he and his staff helped create some of the greatest stories ever told. Comedies of every variety, spellbinding dramas, lively musicals, and heroic Western epics all bore my father's stamp of authenticity. My brother, Ben Nye Jr., and I grew up here, watching and learning from the talented artists who worked in the department. My father spent a lot of time back in the lab, and he developed many special makeup formulas, the origin of what has become Ben Nye Makeup. The makeup department was closed in 1970, just 3 years after my father retired. I'd like to think that my father's spirit lives on today, in and around the sound stages here at Fox Studios. Now let's take a closer look at my father's remarkable career.
Ben Nye's makeup career in Hollywood spanned 30 remarkable years. When he retired from 20th Century Fox, he had supervised the production of over 500 feature films. He once said, "Going to work in the studio was a thrill each day." His colleagues would agree that he never lost that sense of excitement throughout his entire career. Ben Nye was born to Charles and Josephine Nye in a little Nebraskan town called Broken Bow. Later, his family moved to Omaha, where he, his sister Harriet, and brother Ray completed high school. Ben practiced his early makeup skills for their school plays. He said, "Makeup always fascinated me." At the urging of his father, Ben studied geology at the University of Nebraska, but after 1 year, his professor suggested that he study art instead. Not long after, he moved to Los Angeles, where entertainment and the arts were springing to life. At the height of the Great Depression, his uncle got him a job working in the Fox music department copying sheet music for what he called 3 boring years. However, he used the time to cultivate friendships everywhere on the lot. In pursuit of his dream, the studio manager granted his wish to become a makeup apprentice in 1935. He studied under the very talented Monty Westmore Sr., who gave him the extensive training that the young artist would utilize throughout his career. After completing his training, Ben worked long hours on Fox's B films. He said that the days were long, but he had plenty of time to practice his craft. Meanwhile, he married his childhood sweetheart, Barbara Baldwin. In early 1938, Ben received his first A picture assignment, In Old Chicago, starring Tyrone Power, Don Ameche, and Alice Faye. The director, Henry King, had a reputation for being difficult, especially on makeup people. In due time, he earned the director's respect by working hard each day. The film became one of the year's biggest hits. Nye can be seen adding blood and bruises to Power before he and his co-star escape the smoldering ruins of Chicago's legendary fire. His next assignment starred Hollywood's hottest couple, Annabelle and Tyrone Power, in a film called Suez. While working on the backlot, Ben has completed his touch-ups. Annabelle appears cloaked in only a towel and seems poised to take a swim. 1939 was a busy year. Ben worked again with Alice Faye on one of her most popular films, Rose of Washington Square. The artist began work on another Henry King film, Jesse James, featuring Tyrone Power and Henry Fonda. For the first time, Nye was totally responsible for character makeup design. Shot entirely on location in Noel, Missouri, he had to rely solely on his experience. There was much rough and tumble character work throughout, and he said, "I was the makeup department." At the film's dramatic end, Power, as Jesse James, had been mortally wounded. The artist applied a thinly laid, real hair beard on Power that was most convincing. Nye said that his work on the film earned him a great deal of respect among his peers. Ben Nye left Fox to assist his mentor, Monty Westmore Sr., on a Selznick Studios Civil War epic. Gone with the Wind swept the Oscars, and it became one of the century's most celebrated and entertaining films. Ben Nye took charge of Leslie Howard, Olivia de Havilland, and Hattie McDaniel in her Oscar-winning role as Scarlett's nanny. While Mr. Westmore made up Vivien Leigh in the morning, Nye cared for her on the set for the balance of the day. When it came time to Miss Daniel's makeup, no makeup had actually been designed for black performers. Nye effectively blended shades to naturally match her skin tone. Remembering this inequity, Ben began designing a complete palette for black actors in the early 1960s. For many weeks, Ben worked day and night shifts concurrently, especially during the tumultuous burning of Atlanta scenes. After making up his regular talent for the day, he napped in the afternoon, then returned to the set at night to supervise hundreds of cast members who were dirtied, bruised, and injured. Nye said, "Of course all the principals worked at night, and I was responsible for them as well." Nye survived the long hours and the heavy workload. He recalled, "I was recognized for my good work, which allowed me to go on to other assignments." In late 1939, he worked on a film called Intermezzo, starring Leslie Howard and a young Swedish actress appearing in her first U.S. picture, Ingrid Bergman. In 1940, he went on to work for Alfred Hitchcock in the Oscar-winning Rebecca, starring Judith Anderson and Laurence Olivier. Nye said, "I spent one full year at Selznick, and the experience I gained proved invaluable throughout the rest of my career." For several years, he freelanced between Paramount and Warner Brothers. In 1941, he was reunited with Ingrid Bergman on Paramount's classic, For Whom the Bell Tolls. In 1944, Ben Nye's former boss at Selznick moved to Fox, and soon asked Nye to join him as makeup department head. At age 37, Ben Nye was ready for the challenge and quickly accepted the offer. His family was growing. His son, Ben Jr., was now 4 years old. He said it took him a year to iron out the problems in the department, but after this shakedown year, the studio showed its confidence by renewing his contract. As department head, he was now responsible for breaking down every script, production budgets, staffing, plus designing special makeups for every picture. In addition, he was now running his own apprenticeship program, one that would soon be considered the best in Hollywood. In the post-war period, audiences flocked to the movie theaters, and Fox began to invest in larger, more expensive films. In 1947, the studio produced a big-budget love story called Forever Amber. It took place in England during the reign of Charles II. It was also the year his second son, Dana, was born, named after Dana Andrews, who was on contract at the studio. Richard Haydn played King Charles, As was often his prerogative, Ben personally put Hayden in makeup each day. However, a staff makeup artist would stand by during the filming. As department head, Nye was typically supervising production of 6 to 8 films at once, so he rarely had time to dedicate himself to one film. In a period film, nearly everyone wore wigs and hairpieces. To accommodate the huge makeup calls, Nye requested an entire soundstage for hair and makeup. Ben Nye's makeup lab earned critical acclaim for routinely designing innovative prosthetic appliances and naturally styled hairpieces throughout his career at Fox. Madelene Carrol starred with George Sanders in the 1949 film The Fan, directed by Otto Preminger. Miss Carrol was only 43 years young at the time, but Nye's remarkable prosthetic design aged her well into her 70s. Patricia Medina, as the witch in the 1961 film Snow White and the Three Stooges, is a stunning example of the beautiful work created by Ben Nye's special effects lab. His imagination and creativity would forever alter the significant role makeup played on the big screen. A year later, the lab's resources were particularly challenged when the studio began preparing for a big film about the reign of Queen Victoria, called The Mudlark. Nye quickly realized that the star, Irene Dunn, bore no resemblance to Queen Victoria, who, unlike Miss Dunn, was quite plain and portly. Armed with the pictures from the studio's research library, Nye booked the actress for a full face impression in preparation for extensive prosthetics. He and his lab director, Dick Smith, no relation to today's Oscar winner, sculpted a unique, one-piece, full-face latex foam appliance. Smith's supple rubber formula allowed the actress complete facial mobility. Due to the complexity of this innovative design, Nye won permission to join the crew in England to personally put Miss Dunn into character each morning. Nye recalled that the director agreed to shoot all her close-ups first thing, so she always looked her best. The artist created an outstanding likeness of Napoleon on Marlon Brando for the 1954 film Desiree. Several years later, Nye again worked with Brando on One-Eyed Jacks and The Young Lions. Next, Nye was handed yet another difficult assignment for the film Prince of Players. In a story about assassin John Wilkes Booth, Nye would design prosthetics to match the distinct features of President Abraham Lincoln. After rejecting several dozen actors sent over from casting, Nye accidentally found a dancer working on a rehearsal stage who had just the right chiseled features. The performer, though short in stature, appeared only seated at the film's end when he is fatally shot. Besides prosthetic chin, cheeks, and nose, the design includes bald cap, wig, and a hand-laid beard. Nye was very proud of this design. It remains one of the best likenesses of President Lincoln ever created. Big budget and highly acclaimed musicals were produced in the studio in the late 50s, including South Pacific and Carousel. In 1956, Deborah Kerr and Yul Brynner starred in the Oscar-winning The King and I. Nye created a special body stain for the actor called bronzing tint that Mr. Brynner wore whenever performing this famous role. Bronzing tint continues to be a standard in the Ben Nye makeup line. In 1957, Ben Nye was handed a script called The Fly. As was often the case, he was asked to develop a character completely of his own imagination. The film became a legend in sci-fi storytelling. Producers wanted to know how long and how much it would cost to create this half-man, half-fly character. At first, he didn't have an answer. The production was slated to begin in 8 weeks, and Nye had to do some pretty fast thinking. The story featured David Hedison, who was quickly scheduled for a full face impression. The film's art director created drawings from Nye's ideas, and Dick Smith began sculpting clay on Mr. Hedison's life mask. Nye decided to glue the individual foam pieces to a tight-fitting fabric. After painting it in dark blue, green, and black, the fly suddenly came to life. With 6 weeks left, Ben and his staff began testing beaded eyes that would fit into metal sockets. He airbrushed them with luminescent paints. Meanwhile, the fly's proboscis was designed in a V shape with a sucker tip at the end. Sparse turkey feathers were painted and glued in place. Held in Mr. Hedison's mouth, it was the mask's sole point of animation. The artist trimmed a sparsely ventilated wig and glued it to the mask. He enjoyed the creation of the character, and in this photo, he's seen taking a little off the top. After the final test, everything was approved except the eyes. Within several days, Nye had twin convex shells molded to fit the eye openings and painted them with translucent color. They were quickly approved. Nye painted the fly's claw in the same dark metallic colors, and apprentice Dick Blair applied a thin cover of hair. Nye said, "It looked very menacing." Moviegoers will always remember the desperate cries of the fly caught in the web as the spider approaches. Nye was hugely satisfied with his design, but he was also disappointed that his work was scarcely seen because the producers thought the character was too frightening for the audience. In a few years, Irwin Allen moved to the lot, and a host of sci-fi movies became box office hits. Over the next decade, the makeup department remained a beehive of activity, creating just the right characters for the many comedies, gripping dramas, and science fiction films produced by Fox. Here are a few of Ben Nye's favorites. The historical epic The Robe starred Richard Burton and Gene Simmons. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, with Marilyn Monroe in her first major starring role. The 1959 classic, The Diary of Anne Frank. Hemingway's Adventures of a Young Man, with a busy young actor, Paul Newman. Shirley MacLaine, Gene Kelly, Paul Newman, and Robert Mitchum produced hijinks in What a Way to Go. The Sound of Music, starring Julie Andrews, epitomized the magic of Hollywood. Irwin Allen's Fantastic Voyage, as with all the sci-fi films of this genre, entertained us with tales of the future. The Flim Flam Man transformed George C. Scott, the actor, into a man who lived by his wits and out of other people's pockets. When Ben Nye began production on Planet of the Apes, he brought in the very best talents of the next generation of makeup artists. The film received a special Academy Award for makeup, but as the cameras rolled, Ben Nye said a fond farewell to the studio that brought him so much joy and satisfaction. He was a creator who used his imagination to make big screen stories come totally alive through his subtle style of realism. And after he left the studio, he began offering his professional cosmetics to the many actors and artists in need of Ben Nye's vital palette of colors. His legendary contribution lives on today through the work of his sons and the company he founded over 30 years ago.
On behalf of the Ben Nye Company, thank you for joining us. All of us at Ben Nye Makeup are dedicated to my father's commitment to quality and innovation. Whether you're in Hollywood or as far away as Helsinki, we wish to thank our customers who have come to expect the very best from us for over 30 years. Count on us for even more in the 21st century.